You know what's funny? Rome didn't invent the iPhone, but it did invent the App Store 2,000 years early. Only difference, their version had worse customer service. You paid in taxes, not Apple Pay. In Rome, all roads led to Rome. In Apple, all apps lead to Cupertino, and both charged a toll. The Romans took your coins. Apple takes 30% and your dignity. And the best part? Romans distracted the masses with gladiators. Apple distracts you with keynotes. At least gladiators fought lions. Tim Cook just fights your attention span with a new shade of iPhone beige. Rome didn't conquer with swords, it conquered with roads, 400,000 kilometers of them. And you couldn't go anywhere without stepping on Roman pavement. That's not infrastructure. That's entrapment with cobblestones. And Apple, same trick. They don't build roads, they build chargers. Rome said, all roads lead to Rome. Apple said, all cables lead to Cupertino. Both empires had potholes. Only difference is Apple charges you $29 for the adapter. Think about it. Rome standardized roads across continents. Apple standardized the lightning cable, then killed it and made you buy USB-C. That's not innovation. That's imperial taxation disguised as packaging. Romans taxed you at bridges. Apple taxes you at the charging port. One empire took your coins. The other empire makes you pay for a piece of plastic that costs 2 cents to make. Infrastructure as empire. Aqueducts brought water. Apple dongles bring tears. Rome was famous for its laws. Contracts, citizenship, taxes, all carved into stone. If you lived under Rome, you followed Roman law. No appeal, no refund policy. And Apple, same idea. The App Store isn't a marketplace, it's a courtroom. And Apple is both the judge and the tax collector. Romans taxed salt. Apple taxes your Candy Crush gems. One empire made your food salty. The other makes your wallet salty. They call it the Apple tax. 30% on everything. Subscriptions, apps, purchases. It's not a fee, it's tribute. You don't pay, you don't play. And if you don't like it, too bad. Rome didn't have alternative roads. Apple doesn't have alternative stores. You think you own your iPhone? You don't. You rent permission. Romans gave citizenship to make you loyal. Apple gives you a developer license to make you dependent. Same empire playbook, different millennium. And the brilliance. It's invisible. Rome made taxes feel normal. Apple made 30% feel normal. That's not business. That's empire management with a shiny logo. Rome didn't just build roads and laws, it built illusions. The Colosseum wasn't entertainment. It was anesthesia. Bread, circuses, and just enough blood to make you forget the empire was stealing your taxes. It was basically Netflix, if Netflix fed Christians to lions. And Apple, they don't need lions, they have keynotes. Once a year they dim the lights, play dramatic music, and unveil a rectangle that looks exactly like the last rectangle, but with one extra camera lens. And the crowd loses its mind. Romans screamed for gladiators. Apple fans scream for megapixels. At least, gladiators risk their lives. Tim Cook risks your wallet. One man fought with swords, the other fights with dongles. Rome carved its propaganda into stone so it would last forever. Apple carves its logo into glass so you can see your own reflection while you go broke. Caesar had monuments. Tim Cook has temples where the holy water costs $1,200 and doesn't come with a charger. And here's the magic trick. Most Romans never stepped inside the Colosseum. Most iPhone users will never attend a keynote. But the myth still works. You see the highlights, you hear the applause, you feel like you're part of the empire, even if you're just financing it at 12% interest. So yes, Rome had lions and blood. Apple has pixels and applause. Both kept the crowd loyal. Both made you forget the system bleeding you dry. Different empire, same strategy. Distract, dazzle, dominate. Rome didn't just build walls. It built monuments, temples, art arches, aqueducts, all designed to make you feel small and the empire feel eternal. Walk into the Pantheon and you're not thinking about taxes or corruption. You're thinking, wow, these people were gods. That's design as power and Apple. Same trick, but with Wi-Fi. Walk into an Apple store. It's not a shop, it's a cathedral of capitalism. Marble stairs, glass walls, light shining down like divine rays. No incense, just a faint smell of overpriced silicon cases. You're not buying a gadget. You're attending Mass. Roman architecture whispered, you belong to the empire. Apple architecture whispers, you belong to the ecosystem. One worshipped Jupiter, the other worships Johnny Ive, and both want your loyalty, preferably for eternity, or until the battery dies. Even the details match. Rome built aqueducts to carry water. Apple builds genius bars to carry excuses. Rome gave you arches of triumph. Apple gives you arches of USB cables. One empire left ruins you can still admire. The other leaves you a drawer full of chargers that don't fit anything anymore. And here's the genius. Design isn't decoration, it's domination. Rome made citizens feel proud to be Roman. Apple makes you proud to own a rectangle. And when you mistake pride for freedom, that's when the empire has already won. Every empire thinks it's eternal. Rome thought it. Apple thinks it. Both are wrong. Rome didn't fall in one day. It rotted from the inside. Corruption, overexpansion, dependency on cheap labor, and an elite convinced their empire was too big to fail. Sound familiar? It should, because Apple has its own Roman flu. First symptom, dependence. Rome relied on grain from Africa. Apple relies on factories in China. Cut the supply chain, and suddenly the empire looks a lot less eternal. Caesar worried about revolts in Egypt. Tim Cook worries about lockdowns in Shenzhen. Different century, same headache. Second symptom, arrogance. Rome built golden palaces while citizens starved. Apple builds $5 billion spaceship headquarters while selling you chargers separately. At least Roman bread was free. Apple bread costs $1,200 and comes with Face ID. Third symptom, competition. Rome got crushed by barbarians it underestimated. Apple gets squeezed by regulators, lawsuits, and competitors. Europe is suing them. The US is investigating them. And somewhere in South Korea, Samsung is sharpening its swords. Empires don't collapse when they're weak. They collapse when they're fat, arrogant, and blind. Rome thought it was eternal, until it wasn't. Apple thinks it's eternal, until the next barbarian shows up with a cheaper phone and a charger in the box. So yes, Rome burned. One day, Apple will too. Maybe not with flames, but with lawsuits, lost markets, and the slow humiliation of watching people buy Android. Empires don't survive on armies alone. They survive on loyalty, on devotion, on people so convinced their empire is special, they'll fight to the death to defend it. Romans screamed, Ave Caesar, in the Colosseum. Apple fans camp outside stores for 3 days for the same rectangle in a new color, same passion, different circus. And let's be honest, this isn't technology. It's religion. Rome had temples of stone. Apple has temples of glass. Rome had incense. Apple has unboxing videos with angels singing in 4K. Every empire needs symbols. Rome had the eagle. Apple has the apple. Both bitten, one by myth, the other by marketing. Both saying the same thing. You belong to us. And have you noticed the zealotry? Romans defended Caesar in the Senate. Apple fans defend Tim Cook in YouTube comments. Both empires ran on armies of unpaid fanboys. The funniest part, Romans thought citizenship was eternal. Apple fans think iCloud storage is eternal. Spoiler, both run out when you need them most. Identity is powerful. Rome turned peasants into Romans. Apple turns consumers into missionaries. You don't just buy an iPhone. You buy the myth that you're smarter, richer, cooler, and once your identity is tied to an empire, you'll defend it, even while it robs you blind. Legions, queues, altars, genius bars, bread and circuses, Wi-Fi and AirPods, different toys, same control. Rome taught Apple everything about control, infrastructure, laws, propaganda, design, the whole imperial starter pack. But Rome also taught the most important lesson of all: no empire survives its own arrogance. Rome built monuments so massive they still stand 2000 years later. Apple builds phones so fragile they don't survive a 2-meter drop. Tell me again which empire was stronger. And don't get me wrong, Apple is brilliant. They made a phone to feel like a passport to modern life. They turned the store into a temple. They convinced you a cable was a luxury item. That's sorcery, not business. Even Rome would applaud. But remember this: the Roman Empire collapsed while its citizens were busy clapping at the games. And if you think your iPhone makes you free, try using it without the App Store. That's not freedom, that's dependence with good marketing. So yes, Rome fell. Apple will too. Empires don't vanish overnight. They rot slowly until one day the illusion breaks. And when it does, you'll realize you weren't holding an iPhone. The iPhone was holding you on a leash. I'm Professor Vito, and if you think Apple mastered control, wait until you meet the mafia. And no, not the Hollywood version with guys yelling, "Forget about it," while eating spaghetti. I'm talking about the real blueprint of empires. Wall Street didn't invent corruption. Washington didn't invent loyalty pacts. And your office politics, straight out of Sicily. The mafia was basically a Fortune 500 company, just with more funerals and fewer PowerPoints. So hit subscribe, or my nonna will have a talk with you. And trust me, she's scarier than the mafia.